We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Creator, the one that has blessed us with so many things, that has provided for us, and the one that we will eventually return to. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the wealth that He has given us, the health, the companions, the opportunity to study here, and the other countless blessings. And most of all, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the iman that He has placed inside all of our hearts. It's been about, I think, a week for you guys that you're back into the semester. You're coming to classes, you're starting to get into the groove of things. And you're starting to become part of this. Maybe it's your first year at UB, maybe you've been here a few years. Regardless, you're starting to become part of this new community that changes every year. That this Muslim Student Association, where we all strive to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get closer and closer with our brothers and sisters, and try to form a group that is striving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And having been gone from this group for a couple of years, my advice to you is to take care of it, to cherish it, to get closer to it. Because to be honest, these years in college, these formative years, you will not be able to get that again after you graduate. After you leave this community, there's nothing like it, to be honest. You will always use whatever you learned, the relationships, these formative years, the bonds that you've created during these years will carry you through, inshallah, through your whole life. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "A man is upon the religion of his best friend, so let one of you look at whom he befriends." That whenever you're entering UB, maybe you've been here for some time, look at those who you're closest to. Look at those that are your best friend, those that you spend the most time with, and look at how their religion is, how close they are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are they doing? Are they close enough? Are they where you want to be? Abu Musa radiallahu anhu reported that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Verily the parable of good company and a bad company is only that of a seller of musk and a blacksmith. The seller of musk will give you some perfume, you will buy some, or if you don't buy, you will notice a good smell. And as for the blacksmith, he will burn your clothes just by being there. Or you will notice a bad smell in your clothes just from the fumes of the fire." And so we can see that regardless of whatever friends you have, even if you think of yourself as a certain type of person, maybe you don't think you're like your friends. Maybe you're trying to go a different path. And maybe you hang out with them just for some small reason. But the thing is, wherever you are, whatever kind of friends you have, they're going to be affecting you in some certain way. They're going to affect the way you interact with others. They're going to affect the way you think, the way you talk, even if you don't think you're like them. If you're with a person who sells perfume, you're going to start smelling perfume. If you're with a person who is a blacksmith, you'll start to notice the smell that they're working in. The people that you have with yourself, the good friends that you have are the people that are going to help you improve. They're going to make it easier on yourself. We already know there's an abundance of knowledge out there. It's very easy to learn and understand different things. We know what is right and wrong. We know what we should say and shouldn't say. We know all these different things that affect us. And we know that the closer you are, the better your friend group is, the better people you have, that's going to decrease your desire for the things that are not permissible. Maybe the people you're hanging out with, maybe they're funny, maybe they take some interest, maybe they take the same classes as you. Maybe they take the same classes as you. And maybe, they don't really know what's going on. You might be going on a different path. You may be hanging out with them just because you guys hang out with it, just because you're in the same environment. But if you're not careful with how you act with them, they can be the reason you go to Jannah or Jahannam. These formative years, this is where you're going to start to build and really solidify your personality, the way your deen is, the way your character is. And it's going to take some level of discomfort. It's going to take some level of sacrifice to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this manner. It's either you change those around you, it's either you change who your friends are, or your friends start to become like you. And we can look at the seerah, we can look at the Prophet ﷺ, we can look at his companions, and we can look at how they were persecuted, how they were tortured, how they were not able to, how they couldn't bear what was going on. And they had to safeguard their deen somehow. And so they were given the option to emigrate to Abyssinia. They were given the option to emigrate out of Mecca in order to safeguard their deen, to get away from this persecution, to get away from this torture. Because for some people it was really too difficult. And the thing is, the people that emigrated, it was not just the people who were poor. It was not just the people who were weak, that didn't have enough strength. This was also people from nobility. This was people who were able to, they had a wealthy life, they had a good lifestyle, but they weren't able to safeguard the deen because of the condition they were in. Even people like Habiba radiallahu anha, she was the daughter of Abu Sufyan, and she emigrated. She was from nobility, she was from a high status family, but she left behind that good life in Mecca for the sole purpose of protecting her religion. And we come to the opposite end of people who couldn't let go of their lives, who couldn't let go of their desires. There are some youth in Mecca who became Muslim. They were wealthy, they had a good life, they had a high status, they were from noble families. And yet they became Muslim, but when it came time to make hijrah, when they were told to make hijrah to Medina, they couldn't make that sacrifice. They were influenced by those around them. They were influenced by those disbelievers around them, and they couldn't leave that life they had been living. That very high luxury life that they were living, they couldn't leave it behind. And so even though they accepted this Islam, they lived the way they were around the people around them. And so they died fighting with the disbelievers. And they were associated with them, and they died with them. And we notice that Allah's help comes when we make the effort, when we show our dedication. When the tests come, we show our dedication to Islam, that we aren't going to waver. And Allah's help will come once we start doing that. Mus'ab Ibn Umair radiallahu anh, a famous Sahaba who was maybe around the age that we are, maybe in his late teens, early 20s. He was very wealthy. He was one of the best looking men of his time. He had everything. They would say that when he was passing by an area, because he had so much perfume, when he left that area you could tell that Mus'ab was there. And yet, when he became Muslim, he sacrificed everything. He left, he emigrated to Medina, he was the ambassador there for Islam, and he started to establish Islam there. And he was only in his early 20s. And we can see he sacrificed everything for Islam, so that when he was buried, when he died after one of the battles, they barely had any cloth to cover him. When they covered his head, they could barely cover his feet. When they covered his feet, it wouldn't cover his head. So they covered his head and they put some leaves on his feet. And that is how he was buried, and he was rewarded Jannah. And I want to give a side note that, it's really important that we study the seerah, that we study the Prophet ﷺ, that we study the Prophet, the Sahaba, and how their lives were, what they had to endure, what made them, what was their sacrifices, and what they had to endure. It is the reason that you are Muslim today. It is the reason that your ancestors became Muslim, because of their sacrifices and the patience they had and what they had to endure. At the end of the day, there's no excuse for us. The knowledge is widely available. We have the environments. In Buffalo alone, there's maybe 50 to 60 masajid, and we have one of the best MSAs in the country, where so many resources are there. We know that there are people plotting against us. We know that there are people plotting against the Muslim Ummah that are spending millions and billions of dollars in media and entertainment and research on how they can suppress our deen, how they can keep you away from your religion, how they can keep you away from seeking knowledge. And we realize that because of all these things, the least we can do is to make some sort of sacrifice for our religion, to start learning what our religion is, to start safeguarding our deen, to start following the right path. Because there are people that are plotting much, much harder to keep you away from it. And there are small things in our life. There are different obstacles. Maybe your friend group is not, as good as you want it to be. Maybe your family is not as quote unquote religious as you might want it to be. But you have that mindset. You have that mindset that you want to come closer to this religion. One person can change a group. One person can change a family. One person can change a society. And we know this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent prophets. And He didn't send multiple prophets to one group at a time. He sent one prophet. He sent one or two prophets. Because we know that one prophet can change this group. A prophet that was a part of the people, that came from them, that people were able to relate to and understand them. That these prophets were not just someone from outside coming into their people. This was a person that was amongst them. And when they were delivered the message of Islam, they came to their people and they preached to them. And they tried to guide them to Islam. And we know that even though there are instances where people don't listen, we know that we still have to make this effort to change our groups, to change our families. We know the story of Nuh. Surah Nuh talks about all his complaints. He was preaching to his people for hundreds of years. And at the end, only a few listened to him. Surah Nuh talks about all his complaints about the people. They wouldn't listen to him. He would go out to them day and night. He would go to them in public and in private. And no matter what he did, they would always turn away from him. They were stubborn. They were against him. And only a few followed him after so many years. Yet he still delivered the message to them. And it is an obligation for us to deliver the message to others. It is an obligation for us to keep our deen, to help others when we're trying to strive towards our deen. We might think that we're not there yet. We might think that, maybe we don't think we're as religious as, the others around us. But we know that there's a hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in hadith Qudsi, where we hear a conversation between the angels and the Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where a group of people are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're sitting in this gathering, and the angels are hearing what these people are saying. And so the angels go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have a conversation where the angels tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what they were doing, that they were reminding each other about Allah, and they were praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He asked what these people want, and He said that they want forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they want Jannah. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive those people, and He will accept their du'as. And the angels will also say that among them, there is a person who is not necessarily with them. He just came and he sat down. That he wasn't one of these pious people, but he came and sat down with that gathering. And so they ask, what should they do about this person? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives this person as well, because he sat down with these people, because he associated himself with this gathering. And I know this is a lesson for us. If we're here in this institution and we have a place, this MSA, we have an environment where we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we can associate ourselves with others that we think are better than us, then sit with them, learn with them. And I understand that we have to make a balance with school, but when it comes time to make close friends, you have to make close friends with the right people. You have to find those people that are really going to benefit you. And these relationships will carry on even after college. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to safeguard our deen, to help us pass our tests, and to keep us in groups and environments that please Him. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم.